So what is the Rite of Exile and how does one become immortal? Today I'm going to talk to you about the final step in the cycle of strife and my experience in becoming the immortal. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Captain Nemo. Welcome to another Diablo Immortal video. Today we're going to be talking about the cycle of strife. We're going to be talking about the Rite of Exile and that final step if you wanted to become immortal. In fact, today I'm going to tell you about my experience and my clan's experience in becoming the Immortals on our server. This is actually the first part to a series that I'm doing, a 3-part series on immortality. In the next video, we're going to take a deep dive into the Immortals, all of the activities, all of the buffs, everything you need to know on the Immortals is going to be in the next video. And finally, in the third part, I'm going to wrap it all up by giving you my experience of being the immortal, and of course all of the things that I think need to change in this faction, all of the things that I think could be good and bad in immortality. My final review is going to be in the third part of this series. So make sure to slap the like button and subscribe to make sure that you do not miss out on those videos which are coming up very soon. So what is the Rite of Exile? Well, it's a final part in the whole series of activities that the Shadows are doing to make sure that they're worthy and ready to challenge the Immortals. They do the Shadow Wars, which by the way is a whole different activity. I'll link it for you up here if you want to know more about it. There's a really good deep dive video for you right there. But it's a whole activity that basically determines the top 10 Shadow Dark clans that are going to, of course, challenge the Immortals in this thing called the Rite of Exile, the final stage, the final battle, so to speak. Now there's 80 people that are going to be fighting. So there's 80 Shadows versus 80 Immortals that are fighting in a simultaneous battle. There's 8 of them, 10v10s. So there's 10 Immortals versus 10 Shadows, and then there's 8 instances of that going all at once. So you as the Immortals, you pick 80 people to go in and face these top 10 Dark clans that get decided in the Shadow War. So in our case, that was top 10 Dark clans from our server. There was a bunch of Scrappy clans along with the other clans in the server. And we, of course, challenged the Immortals, who were NPCs by this point. Remember, the first immortality on the server is always the NPCs. So we challenged them and it wasn't really that difficult, right? We definitely beat the Rite of Exile. It was nice and easy. Now, this isn't going to be the case, of course, when there's challengers who are not NPCs on the other side. When it's a player versus player, this Rite of Exile becomes crazy. What is the Rite of Exile? It's basically battlegrounds. Battlegrounds done in 10 instances at once. And remember, in order for Shadows to succeed to the next stage, they have to beat more than 5, right? So they have to win more than 5 battles in order for the Immortals to keep their immortality, so to speak. In order for them to defend and stop the Shadows right there at the right, they have to defend and, of course, win more than 5 battles themselves. So if the Immortals win more than 5, this stops right there, and the Shadows have to go back and try to do this all over again next week. Now, if the Immortals lose, the next stage is initiated, which is, of course, the fight with the Immortal himself. This is where the Immortal becomes a big, huge raid boss and takes on 30 Shadows. Each clan leader picks 2 more, and of course, for a total of 30, because there's top 10 Dark clans, they go in and 30 Shadows are fighting this one big raid boss Immortal in the fight with the Immortal. Now, if the Immortal wins and the Shadows lose, just like before, just like in the Rite of Exile, everything just goes back to normal and the Shadows can try again next week. And of course, the Immortals become stronger by gaining more dominance. If the Immortal loses, at that point, the cycle of strife is definitely turning. At that point, the current Immortals are going to lose their immortality to one of the top 10 Dark clans that beat them. Now, how does this work? Well, there's a timer that goes off so it's actually kind of really cool. I like this. It's a really nice change from the beta. So what ends up happening is the Immortal goes down, and as soon as that Immortal goes down, there's a timer that goes on. As soon as that timer reaches 0, this becomes a free-for-all. A free-for-all for all of the clans to fight it out, those top 10 Shadow clans to fight it out, and the winner is the last clan standing. So whoever is the last person or last clan standing is going to be the Immortals. Whoever is the leader of that Dark clan will be the Immortal himself. So if you think about it, this entire thing starts over there with the Shadow War and deciding who is going to be in the top 10 Dark clans, because these Dark clans are the ones that are, of course, going to challenge the Immortals in the Rite of Exile. And if the 80 Immortals lose to the top 10 Dark Clans, then they of course go up against the Immortal himself. And if the Immortal falls, at that point the entire immortality is lost. The cycle of strife is going to turn. And of course the winner of this free-for-all is the one that's going to be the Immortals. That's the clan that are going to take it. Of course, when that clan takes it and becomes the Immortal, there's 300 Immortals total. So they're allowed to pick 2 allied clans to come into the immortality with them as soon as they become immortal the next day. Now, an important thing to note, and of course we'll talk more about this in a lot more detail in the next video when we do a deep dive into immortality, but there's 4 lieutenants and they can only be from the founding clan. So the actual first clan that won immortality, not the allied ones, are the ones that get to pick the lieutenants, nobody else. So it's a good thing to just keep in mind. But before we go into all of the rest of that stuff, let's step it back for a second and talk a little bit about my own personal experience, right? So what ended up happening? We have multiple Scrappy clans on the server. We currently actually have 5, but in the case when we were playing the Rite of Exile, we had 4 clans. So 4 Scrappy clans were going in to the Shadow War, and of course all 4 of them made it into the top 10 Dark Clans. So 4 Scrappy clans out of the 10 were going into this Shadow War. Now, again, as we talked about in the Shadow War, you go up against the Immortal himself, and as soon as the Immortal goes down, that's when it becomes a free-for-all. So realistically speaking, the Rite of Exile that happened was really against the NPCs, right? I mean, yeah, it was fun. We've done it before. It's just like Battlegrounds. So if you could just play a whole bunch of Battlegrounds, make sure that you understand how that works, you're pretty much going to be prepared for, the Rite of Exile in a sense. Now, it was the NPCs. So really easy, right? This is not my first time doing it. I've done this in the alphas and the betas. So this is, again, not the first time. But the NPCs are super easy if you notice. I mean, I went in there and just wiped them all out myself. They really don't pose too much of a challenge. This is not going to be the case, of course, when you're going against the real players. The real players will pose a massive challenge, and this is when it's going to become fun. Now, I realized that the Rite of Exile, in our case, was just going to be against the NPCs. We just made sure we win. The real fight was going to be when the Immortal goes down. So now, in our case, once we won the Rite of Exile, we had like a 15-minute buffer. It gives you like a 15-minute timer to get your stuff together before the next event starts, which is that fight with the Immortal. So in that time, like the clan leader is able to pick 2 people to go in with them. You're able to change your sets if you want, because you probably want to be on a PvP set at that point. Maybe you get on voice, like on Discord, and talk to your teammates, talk about strategy and etc. We kind of realized, right, the Immortal again is the NPC. It's going to go down real quick. If you notice here, he goes down in less than like, I don't know, maybe 2 seconds, a second. Not even that. He just dropped like a sack of, like a sack of potatoes. The Immortal NPC just went down. But of course, there was 30 shadows going against him, right? 30 OP shadows like us. But as soon as that happened, of course, that's when the free-for-all starts and all of this craziness starts. Remember, the whole idea of this, when the free-for-all begins, right? The idea isn't to be the clan that gets the most kills. It isn't about being in the glory and jumping right into the middle with all the rest of them doing all of their attacks in the middle. The person that wins is the last person standing. It's not about being the best person. It's about being the last person. That's the key here. And that was basically my strategy with my clanmates. I said, hey, let's make sure that we stick together. No way you should want to separate with your clanmates at that point. You want the 3 of you want to be together. Always want to be standing there because you want to engage whoever as a group. You notice, we're all in VC, we're all talking. We want to engage everybody as a group because there's 3 of us, right? It also allows us to, hey, if one person is like really down, you can sort of like jump out a little bit, say, hey, I'm healing, use a band-aid, and while that's happening, the other 2 are covering him. I mean, in a perfect scenario, but really it's a good idea to work as a 3-person unit at this point and to stay away from all those crazy areas where everyone is fighting, where everyone is throwing skills, because as soon as you get in the middle, there's, 5, 6 people all throwing their specials. You're not going to survive a lot. You want to make sure that you sort of like sit on the side and kind of pick off the people that are going to be running at you. As soon as someone comes in and engages you, the 3 of you take them out, and that's kind of how we were working. Once the big brawl in the middle over there ended, because that's what ended up happening. Our top clan went and tried to go up against the other clans. They all went up against each other. There was just a mad brawl there in the middle, and I told my guys, I told my clanmates, whoa, do not go in there. Let's just wait, sit back a little bit. And once they all kind of, finished killing each other off a little bit, Then a whole bunch of those teams that kind of broke off because one or two of their teammates died, started running around and trying to pick other people. We had a full team. It was always 3 against usually 1 or 2, and we ended up taking them down, picking them off to the point where we were the only full team left on the field at the end. Actually, I think at the end there, to be honest with you, there was only Scrappy clans left. I don't know, but at one point I just saw like 5 or 6 people on the field, and I noticed that it was the 3 of us, and I said, hey, I think we're the only ones that are actually a full clan. Let's make sure we stick together. And we were able to basically outmuscle everybody and win. Now remember, it doesn't matter if it's one of us or all 3 of us. It was actually really good to see that all 3 of us, right, me and my 2 clanmates, of course, Steve Robinson and Marine One, I really appreciate, by the way, all of you having my back, went in there. I mean, if you notice too, half the time I'm running for my life. Like, I came so close to dying so many times, but it wouldn't have really mattered, because if any of them would have ended up surviving, of course, we all became the Immortal, and I would become the Immortal himself because I was the clan leader. So once it's over, as you notice right here, I become the Immortal by accepting the powers. My clan becomes the Immortal as well. There's a whole bunch of shadow activities that have to happen. If you notice, everyone has to turn in their shadow powers because the whole cycle is now reset. As soon as the cycle turns, the immortality is lost. Everyone gets reset to Adventurer. So everybody on the server, including the current Immortal clan that just went down, become the Adventurers. And the only people that become the Immortals is automatically me and my clan, because we won. Now I will also be able to pick 2 allied clans to go in with me. So 300 clans total. Remember, these allied clans cannot be shadow clans. So if you were to wait a bunch longer, you can only pick, of course, adventurer clans. But of course, when the cycle turns, everybody's an adventurer, so it makes sense. You pick your 2 friends, you become the Immortals, and then everybody else has to work again to become the dark clans, get the signets, and do all of the stuff they need to do, and the whole cycle begins all over again. And in between all that, when the old Immortals go down and before the new Immortals sort of take over, there's like a whole week long of celebrations where everybody gets a whole bunch of rewards. They put flags up. There's like a whole bunch of stuff. All the NPCs are walking around and talking about the new Immortals. It's a nice little like server celebration for the clan that became the Immortals. It's kind of cool. One thing I found kind of funny is that after you become the Immortal, or basically once the cycle turns, and you go through and do your final stages, right? Everybody goes in, they do a little celebration over there in the Court of Whispers. You go through, you pick up stuff, and at the last, you actually drop your shadow status, you turn it back in. And then the last thing you do is you talk to bartender Bailey. And in my case, because we were the Immortals, the last thing he said to us is like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, get out of here. Like, you don't belong here anymore. You're no longer allowed in the Court of Whispers because you became the Immortal. But of course, now you have access to the whole of Ascension, a whole bunch of new activities. There's a whole bunch of new rewards, so much stuff that goes on to Immortality. And of course, I'll be covering that in my next video, in a full deep dive into what's going on with the Immortals. Everything you need to know is going to be in that video. And that's sort of the story a little bit. I never really wanted to become Immortal, to be honest with you. We had 3 other clans that were in this top 10 Shadow War, right? So 4 of us, I figured another clan was going to take it. It wasn't really my thing. If you watched any of my other videos, I always talked about how I don't like immortality, but somehow, some way, I ended up becoming the Immortal. I'm gonna, of course, embrace this. I'm gonna do a whole bunch of videos on this, push this as long as I can, and take you along on the ride with me. We're gonna talk about the Immortals, we're gonna talk about the good and the bad, we're gonna talk about everything. We're gonna do some guides on it. I'm gonna show you how it all works. And of course, we'll see how long the Scrappy Echoes can hold on to being the Immortals on the current server that we're on. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video.